Okay, well, we're 3:02. I think we should get started because Chris has come with many gems of great information today. So yeah, I guess personally, as a relatively recent returner from overseas, being Australia in Melbourne, I'm thrilled to be able to speak to Chris Maika today. Chris is knowledgeable on lots of things I've just found out, including rugby teams of the 1990s here in New Zealand. But he's also a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the Māori language, Te Ao, tikanga, and lots of other things, I guess, under the umbrella of Māori culture. So being Māori Language Week this week, we thought, there's probably not a better person to bring along and speak to us than Chris himself. Chris has had a fairly intensive career in the learning space. I did a little bit of research into you earlier, Chris, and well, some of the names you've worked for across New Zealand in terms of government brands and also private brands as well. It's the who's who of New Zealand government and further afield. So Chris has been working with MB, ACC, New Zealand Ministry of Justice, Public Trust. At the moment he's working with Inspire Group, who many of you may have come across, and Inspire was obviously the agency where Chameleon was born out of. He's also played a bunch of rugby for Bay of Plenty between 1990 and 1993, and he didn't know I'd probably going to mention that, but I thought I'd just call that out. And Chris, also, I did a bit of research into you online, and I see you did a waka race back in 2020, a 10-kilometre waka race. So just as we kick off, can you tell me a little bit about that before we hear a little bit more about, I guess, your career and your journey so far?
Ka whai, yeah, well, good. Thank you, Reese, and kia ora whānau. Nice to be on the channel and talking to you today and having a kōrero, and a privilege to be able to share what I know. Waka ama has been my life since I finished playing rugby when I was the golden age of 40, and I needed something else to do, and my very, very injured knees and body were permitting me not to run anymore, so I had to look for something else to sort of focus my sporting attentions on. So a friend of mine introduced me to the world of waka ama, or otherwise known as outrigger canoeing, and it's a sport that is really prevalent in the South Pacific and the islands of Hawaii and Tahiti, and also Aotearoa, but actually it's gathering momentum and it's starting to go further afield in places like Brazil, in the United States, and then just recently, a month ago, the World Championships of Sprints for waka ama was held in England, of all places.
Wow.
So it's a sport that's growing in popularity and in strength, and I've been involved in that sport for around about 15 years now. And I do races in both the long form or marathons, and that's sort of up to somewhere like 30 to 40 kilometers. And I also do sprint racing, shorter distances of around about 500 meters.
Wow.
So it's something that's just been a part of my life for a little while now.
So how long just quickly, Chris, being a sporting fan myself, how long does one of those ultra distance, those 30 to 40 kilometre races take? Are we talking hours or?
Yep, so typically a 30 kilometre race would be 3.5 hours on the water.
Wow.
So the biggest race in Aotearoa that's held every February is the Takapuna Beach Race, and that's raced from Takapuna, obviously, from the beach. And you go around Rangitoto Island back to Takapuna Beach, which is around about 38 kilometres.
Oh, okay, right. I'll leave that to you, sir, and I'm not gonna pick that up anytime soon. As inspirational as the little intro was there. So, Chris, can you give us, I guess, a quick shot guide of, you know, background of you, I guess your journey to where you are now, which is obviously working, you know, reasonably closely with Inspire Group in Wellington and across the country. And I guess we can lead into talking a little bit more about this new venture you've kicked off recently, which is pretty exciting as well. Ruku Ki Te Ako, which I'm excited for you to you know, share a little bit more with us as well.
Kia ora. Ai, kia ora e te whānau, ko Chris Maika toko ingoa, te aroa me mātātua nā waka, ko tūhaurangi me te hikatū nā hapu, ko te whakarewarewa me te whenua, whare te maika he tūpana kuia, no rotorua nui a kahu, mata moe a hau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. So kia ora whānau, te wiki o Te Ao Māori, special week in the calendar for me, and one that I always look forward to. I just recited to you my pepeha, and you would have picked up a few names that I called out. Rotorua is where I'm from originally, born and bred in the Bay of Plenty, the only bay. I'll put it out there, just maybe. And I was brought up in a little village called Whakarewarewa. Now, if you don't know Rotorua, if you go to Rotorua, there's a Geyser village, and that's called Whakarewarewa. To get to that Geyser village, typically you've got to cross over the Pawaringa stream or river, and in that stream, typically you will come across children who dive for pennies. Now, when you cross over the bridge, you'll hear these children saying, "Throw some money in." Well, back in the day, I was brought up and raised in that village, and I was a penny diver, and that was my source of income from about the age of 4 or 5 years old, right up until about 10 years old. So Rotorua is where I'm from. That's my tūranga waiwai. That's where my father comes from. My mother's from a little place up in the Hokianga Harbour called Whirinaki. And so we have a bit of a mix of blood in terms of iwi affiliation, Te Aroa on my father's side and Ngāpuhi on my mother's side. So a little bit about me in terms of my life. I came up through the grades playing rugby. I thought when I was young, all my life was all about rugby, and that's what I wanted to pursue and do. And so I really focused on playing sport from in my early 20s right up until into my 30s. And along the way, I tried to find some work to support that lifestyle. And I was privileged enough to travel overseas and experience the rugby playing conditions in countries like England, Scotland, Ireland, and also I spent a bit of time in France as well. Along that journey, I was able to pick up work, as I said, and I worked in telecom. Was one of my first jobs actually in 1996 when I came back from overseas, and I worked in sales and marketing for a period of time there, and got some really good grounding on actually how to engage with people and really try and understand what their need was in terms of finding the right solutions for them. So that was a really good grounding for me. And then in the early 2000s, moved to Wellington, and then really came to grips that this town is very much a government town. So I needed to sort of adjust my focus and then sort of entrench myself in government. And I worked for a range of different government agencies, and mainly in the front line. So I have a strong affinity for people who serve others for that organisation and provide services for others. And I've been there, bought the T-shirt, and got the war wounds and the war stories. Along that journey, I took a bit of a diversion into supporting staff and training staff, and I can remember clearly the day that happened. One of my managers, I think it was at Public Trust, said to me, "Geez, you've just got a really good patient way of sort of teaching people and mentoring people. You should think about becoming a trainer." And I was thinking to myself, wow, here's me automatically thinking, I hate public speaking. Why would I ever be a trainer? Because that's what I thought trainers did, was public speaking. But I pursued that, and I made it a bit of a career, and I was able to transition from being customer facing to being a support person for those who actually face the clients. and I transitioned into the world of learning and development. And in the last 20 odd years, I've spent a lot of time in that space in L&D, as they call it in government, and also in OD, government, acronym city, I tell you, and organizational development, and working in a variety of different topics. That's the way I look at it. They're all different topics, from health and safety to inducting new staff through to leadership programs, inclusion and diversity. There's a whole raft of topics that agencies will look at, and I've been involved in quite a few. I've had the privilege in being involved in a lot of those topics. And in the last 18 months, clearly a topic around lifting cultural capability. That's very corporate talk in the government space, cultural capability. In other words, understanding and being aware of Te Ao Māori and what that means to this nation. That's been a key focus of mine in the past 18 months, and I worked at the Ministry of Business, Environment and Employment, focusing on that particular effort. This year, I decided I was going to take a break from work, and I just needed to do some stuff for myself and really consider what I really wanted to do, because I feel as though I haven't grown up yet and I'm still trying to find out what that is. And so I took 6 months off work to really consider my options, and I knew that I had a good insight into government. I obviously have my tikanga Māori to fall back on, and a range of different experiences. And what I was really trying to look for was the right opportunity, and I spoke to a few people around what they could look like, and just took some advice on board. And I was fortunate enough to strike up a conversation with Inspire Group, specifically Dan, who is one of the owners of Inspire Group, and talk to him about the opportunity to work with him in the space of lifting cultural capability in Te Ao Māori for all. And so the initiative, that's called Ruku ki te ako, and that's a play on this word of dive into learning. And it sort of it harks back to that little story I talked to you about being a penny diver, and it brings into context that life experience of mine, plus what I currently do in terms of education and learning. So Ruku ki te ako is an initiative that I'm looking to stand up as a business entity, and it's how do you take Te Ao Māori to a broad, diverse range of people on a digital platform. And that's where I'm currently focused, is working with Reese and the team from Chameleon, as well as the team from Inspire Group. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Chris. That's so probably the best intro we've ever had on one of these calls. So I appreciate that.
Brother.
Yeah. So tell me, I guess, without, I'm not wanting you to pitch a business plan to us or anything like that, but tell us a little bit more about what you're wanting to do. Move into this space with Ruku ki te ako, and how you want to, push this message out digitally. But I guess, what are probably using the first little module that you've already created as a bit of a snapshot. And if you haven't got a hold of that, by the way, folks, we'll send you a follow-up email following this with a link to that module, so you can grab a hold of that and share it with your people. Talk to us about that module, because I think that's a really awesome way to kick off this conversation about, I use this term really loosely, but dipping our toes in the water and approaching this subject that some people feel a little bit uncomfortable about, if I'm honest. And that, that's what, some feedback I hear from time to time. But I think the way you approach it and you break it down, it's a lot more approachable, and it's a bunch of fun as well.
Yeah, nice. And sort of for me, the experience that I always get from being on the marae or being with my own people is one of fun, one of nurturing, and one of embracing and welcoming, and a collaborative, collective style of engagement. And so I want to share that with everyone else. That's the way I was brought up, was to share my culture with people. And so, a digital platform, what does that actually mean? So basically, digital means to reach the masses as and when they want to learn. And typically nowadays that's done through the means of a video, a YouTube engagement, or through an app, or, you know, through your phone, through your devices. And so, you know, the Ruku ki te ako will very much focus on that digital engagement. So what I learned when I was at MBIE was the approach for learning to actually engage with an organization the size of MBIE, 4,000 people. Their first approach was, well, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? So you can't train 4,000 people all at one time. So their approach was, let's focus on leadership first as our first cohort of people to actually bring our capability and lift that. So that's a snapshot of around about 400 odd people. And they will probably go through the typical learning sort of scenario or pathway. And that is to engage with a supplier that has the necessary skills and resources to do a face-to-face engagement. So that might mean that there's a marae visit that's engaged with. Then there'll be courses after that to teach topics around te reo, tikanga, and te riti. And that might be over a period of a few months, which is a really awesome learning experience, and it's really rich. But then the question remains, how do you engage with the other 4,000 people in the organization that just won't have the opportunity to get that richness? And so in my view, there is a definite opportunity to upskill people using today's methods and technology to reach that broad audience. And online digital platform is a way to do that. So that's what we are trying to focus on, is that volume of staff that just won't have the opportunity to attend that type of learning, typical learning. And here we have an option for them to learn as they want, when they want. And, you know, let's be completely honest, in today's environment, people are time poor. So, you know, going to a half-day workshop is just not an option. So how can you give people just smaller bites of learning that they can consume when they can, as they can? So, you know, today's learning methodology, anything over on an online platform, anything over 15 minutes is not best practice. So we're going to sort of look at creating learning opportunities of up to 10 minutes, short, sharp examples, which leads me nicely on to showing you a little bit of the taster module that we've produced, which is around pronouncing Te Ao Māori. So I can share that with you. Bear with me, whānau. I'm not that great on technology, but I'm going to give this a whirl. So just bear with me.
Confidence is everything, Chris. When I talked to you about this earlier, you were like, yep, leave it with me. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do this. Let's rock and roll. So,
I was talking a big game.
Yeah. It was a good game as well. Yeah. So while Chris is bringing this up, it's yeah, here it is here. But this is a module that you know, that Chris obviously put together and with Inspire Group. We can send this out to all of you. We can provide the SCORM package as well. I'll let Chris talk about it in a moment, but one of the things I love about this is the simplicity, but also the visuals that, you know, you and the folks have managed to put into this to make it really beautiful and visual, and really speaks to the Māori culture right throughout.
Kia ora, thank you, Reese. And it was, be fair to say, it was my first introduction to using a tool like Chameleon, and I've been really impressed with its functionality. So, whānau, that's not a plug. I'm just saying that's my experience.
Ka pai. Thank you, Chris.
So let's just run through the module. And as I say, it's 10 minutes at the most, and it has different interactions. You'll see them, and I think it's just best for me to go through it with you. So as you can see, Te Reo Māori, pronouncing vowels is the topic, and then you just click your button to start the module. So let's get started. All right, so your favorite place, and it just asks you, let's start with you. Before we focus on the mahi, what moana awa roto o moana tua uri is your favorite spot in New Zealand? Reflect for a bit on why it's special to you. For example, it might hold wonderful childhood memories of holidays with whānau. So the Bay of Plenty is an obvious one for me, but what I'm going to actually pick is this place up here. My brother-in-law come from a little place called Ngātaki, which is right at the tip here. Can you see where my arrow is? And I spent many a holiday up in Ngātaki with Petera whānau and on the farm doing things like diving for kaimoana or working the land. And, oh, yeah, milking the cows. Oh, for a city boy, that wasn't fun. So I'm gonna pick Ngātaki, which is right at the top here. Ooh, sorry. So you picked a great spot. Thanks for sharing with us, and it just gives you a little bit of feedback. And it talks about whanaungatanga and forming and maintaining relationships and strengthening ties between people. So continue, and you scroll down. No mai, haere mai, welcome. It's great that you're keen to learn some basics of Te Ao Māori. Correct pronunciation is important when it comes to Te Reo, and this 10-minute module will give you a few tips around getting started and dipping your toes in, as Reese has mentioned. Ka rawe. So let's get started. Now we're introducing you to our presenter, and his name is Jeremy Handler. For you who do not know who Jeremy is, he's the frontman of a country and Western band called the Harmonic Resonators. And a few years ago, he became a bit of a social media star by his band started singing Waiata. And especially in the Māori world, he really struck a note, and a lot of people started to follow Jeremy. And you'll see why, because he is a character and a half. He actually has Māori whakapapa from Ngaitahu in the South Island. So I'm just going to play the video. Hopefully, and I'm looking at you, Reese, because I can see you. You can tell me whether you can hear the audio.
We can't, Chris.
Okay.
It might be because of how you've shared it, but we can definitely, obviously, we can share it afterwards. Can you give us the gist of what he's sort of going through there?
Yeah, so basically what Jeremy does is he introduces himself and he does his pepeha around who he is, and he talks about his journey into finding out more about his Māori side, and he talks about the beauty of the language and how much he loves the words, and how important pronunciation is for him. And he talks about the mana of the words, especially people's names and place names, and why they're so important to at least try to pronounce them. And he does it justice. I'm murdering it at the moment, but Jeremy really eloquently gets his message across around the beauty of the words in the reo.
He's a real character as well, isn't he? I think that's part of the appeal of.
He's a crack up. I love that guy. When we were brainstorming around who should front this particular module, and we had some really awesome ideas around the type of person we wanted to see this front this module, right down to All Blacks, our famous singers. And I just thought, for typically an audience that is at the start of their te reo journey, how nice would it be to see somebody that they can relate to? A person that's giving it a try at the start of a journey, and maybe you might see a little bit of yourself in that person as well. That was the thinking behind it. So in this particular next part of the module, then Jeremy starts going through instruction around pronouncing vowels a, e, I, o, u, and gives you some examples and opportunities to practice yourself. So after each, you can go through the transcript, and it actually breaks it right down to you with phonetics as well, if you can see that. You're nodding, Reese, so you can see that.
Yep, I can see it. Yep.
Awesome.
This is great. I'll take my daughter through this. I reckon she'd love it.
And then he also goes into the long vowel sounds, and a very similar pathway around how to do those, and gives you time to actually practice yourself. And there's a transcript that follows as well. And then we just ask a little quiz to see if you're onto it. And I've got the true. Let's see me see if I pass. Oof. Thank God, I passed. And then there's what's called kiwaha, so slang sayings that you could use in everyday conversations. And there's an audio file that you can press play, and the kiwaha will come up. And also you've got the transcript, which you can also read. So reka, sweet. Karawhiua, give it heaps, go hard. Kārawe, awesome. Kua taka te kapa. Oh, the penny has dropped. E rua, yes, same. Ea mea ana koe, you bet. Marama keke, piece of cake.
Unprompted question, Chris, but one of my father's favourite, I guess, slang saying is as good as gold. How would you pronounce that in today? Is there something similar?
Gold. I think something like good as gold. What would be a good one? Karawe, sweet. You know, it's
Okay.
karawe.
Yeah, cool.
It's the same sort of thing.
Okay.
And then in this next particular slide, there's stuff that you can actually you can look at more. There's more learning that you can click into, and it takes you to different links and different sites. So you can watch some TV episodes with tuku reo, ki waha. You can listen to some podcasts. You can give it a go. Stacey Morrison, she has some great learning opportunities and audio files. And there's a lot of stuff that you can click into where you can be referred to other reading material as well. And there's a few things you can do as well. So it's sort of it caters to all the different learning styles. And then there's some calls to actions, whakaata whaero. And we ask you just to review and just to think about what you've learned from the module and some aha moments. Some kiwaha that you might use next week. And some resources that you might be curious to check out. And then a bit of a challenge, a call to action about what you're going to do for yourself for the next week.
So Chris, while you're working through this, so is this the final slide? It is,
this
isn't
is
it?
The final slide.
Yep. I can't say how much I love this. I love the visuals. I love the movement. You know, you've included there as well, and the beautiful backgrounds too. I guess question for you is, you've obviously chosen this as the first module for a reason, and I know you've done a bunch of, you've had a lot of koreo with people across the industry, and you've had some really good discussions and done a bunch of research. So this is the insight that you've sort of gathered, is that this is where people need to start, right? This is the first cab off the rank where you feel like this is a good place for organisations to dip their toe in the water.
Well, it's the natural first step in terms of, sort of one of the things I would probably impress on you is taking, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, is taking small steps as far as trying to learn something like a culture. So I think in my mind and talking and through my experience and talking to networks, the first place to focus on would be around the language itself, the reo, and pronunciation is probably the first natural step to take.
Yeah, because you were kind enough to write a few words, and I've taken a few notes actually earlier, on a bit of a blog for us, an article, and that was the message you wanted to get across in the very beginning of that article, was starting small. So that was around, the language is paramount, and pronunciation, talking about introducing your people to Te Ao Māori as well. And then I guess moving into, sharing with people a history of the colonisation and how, how as a society or a community we sort of have ended up where we are now.
Yeah, by all means, and there's some big meaty chunks of learning there to sort of to really get yourself involved in. But yeah, definitely a small steps approach is probably a good thing. And you could introduce some really easy learning opportunities fairly quickly around daily greetings, kia ora, You know, it's relatively easy to start introducing these small steps, ki waha, reka, karawe, you know, all these little things start to accumulate. And for me, I think, you know, learning any new skill just takes time, effort, and nurture, and it's consistency. And but in that, for me, if I was ever learning something, I just need to have a couple of things: variety and also fun.
Yes, yes.
And you've got me every time. It's like, you know, I will then be really motivated to actually you know, learn that particular thing, because it's fun and it's fresh and that always gets me and engages me.
Yeah, I think one of the things we discussed really early on when we first met, this is going back a number of weeks now, was this nervousness sometimes around using Te Ao and pronouncing words incorrectly, and just that fear of putting yourself out there. I went to a mihi whakatau recently at my daughter's preschool to welcome, well, sorry, school, to welcome us to the community, and you know, as the parents of our children, and even then I nervously, you know, took part in some Māori greetings and things, and it sort of, you know, took me back to that conversation we were having. I'm not sure if that's just me or if that's a feeling amongst a lot of people, but you know, I think potentially that's where some folks, you know, hit the pause button, because they just feel a little bit nervous around, you know, stepping out and starting to pronounce some Te Ao.
Ka pai, and I completely, I am empathetic to that. I mentioned I have a history of playing sport, and I played in France for a period of a year, and I had absolutely no parler français when I got there, and it was an interesting challenge, because now I had to put myself in the shoes of the learner. But it's funny when you're in an immersion situation where you have to immerse yourself within a culture, that you soon learn to put your fears aside, and actually you need to eat, you need to drink, and you need to find the basics of life. So, you know, but not everyone has that opportunity to go and live in a different country. But, you know, it's funny, you can extend yourself. And I can tell you now, whānau, that fear aspect is a real thing. And I remember being at MB last year and taking a cohort of leaders onto the marae. And, you know, they spoke about their fears around that. And I know that the kaimahi of the marae were very supportive and just wanted to allay fears and say, actually, there are a lot of Māori that will support anybody to try and learn our language and our culture. And, you know, we'd rather that you try, and we'd try and support you as best as possible.
Yeah, it's I feel like I'm bringing up my daughter every couple of minutes, but I think one of the wonderful things about having children as well is, you know, it's so prevalent in younger education now. They're bringing this home to us, and as parents, we have to learn and understand and do homework and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite neat to go on that journey as well. I'm going to open up to the floor in a moment for any questions that anyone has. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat. But I think one of the questions I'm keen to touch on, and this doesn't come with any negative connotation at all, but can you, in your experience, can you share some insights into, I guess, where organisations are sometimes missing an opportunity to step forward into this sort of space? Like, are there things you see often? It's like, oh, geez, that would have been a great opportunity to introduce some Te Ao or some tikanga into their workplace.
Yeah, by all means. So what I liked about working at MB, which was a previous employer, was a really strategic focus on lifting Te Ao Māori knowledge within the organisation. So really investing. So what they did there was to actually place somebody at the very top of the executive tree of Māori heritage in the key position of executive team. And that really gave a clear indication from the organisation that they were invested in lifting capability and lifting Te Ao Māori knowledge. From that filtered out a number of different initiatives around things like creating values that align to Te Ao Māori, manakitanga, whakawhanaungatanga, kotahitanga, all these key words that actually when you look at the words, they're no different to typical values that you will see in an agency. Right down to creating karakia that was relative to MBIE, and also waiata, and making that an everyday option for people to actually engage with. So things like having waiata within different floors of the agency on Stout Street in Wellington. That was a common thing you'd walk into. There's nothing more beautiful than walking in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you can hear through the atrium waiata being sung, and you're just like, oh man, I just feel like getting up and going and joining in, and or you'd go to a meeting, and the meeting was started with a karakia that was designed specifically for MBIE. So like these opportunities were brought about because the organisation had a strong why. And their strong why was, sort of engaging and uplifting Māori culture for the organisation to be able to be better responsive to Māori. So, it all started from that to then it sort of infiltrate through the organisation through different ways and different means. I don't know if I answered that question, but I sort of went around it.
No, you did. That's wonderful. Like that's a really, great real world example that I'm sure there's lots of folks on this call can resonate with, and even that opportunity to put someone into the organisation, at the front of the organisation to lead from the front as well, to indicate to the to the organisation how important it is. I work in a shared workspace here, Chris, and geez, I'd love to turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning to hear some waiata. So maybe I'll have to I'll bring the guitar to work and give it a crack. I might get a few sideways looks, but you never know, right? Yeah, I've got a couple.
That thing I talk to you, and a lot of companies and agencies, and this is what I found is it's always about relevance. When you're working in a role, and in my experience, what I found, the closer you are to serving the person who you are serving, the consumer of your services or products, the more relevant it becomes to learn a different culture, especially in Aotearoa around serving Māori, because that's a everyday reality. The further you're away from the actual front line of serving, and this is harking back to my days of being frontline, the less relevant it becomes, and trying to find that why becomes quite important. So,
so how do you, sorry, I think there's a bit of a delay sometimes, Chris, with our conversation, but yeah, can you share us a little bit more about the why? I've got two really great questions to ask you as well from the audience, but how do you, it's a big question, probably something we can't cover off in a few minutes, but how have you helped businesses to uncover the why, to get them on?
That's a great question. I think stuff around, if businesses have visions and values, there is a connection there that you can make with that of Te Ao Māori in terms of those values. If it's mahitahi, working together, or tika, being fair and doing the right thing. These are all interchangeable. They all align. So, making that relevance is very much, I think, is associated with organisation values and vision. And the other thing is, in terms of those back office roles, I'll just call it back office roles, the opportunity to actually grow and develop yourself as a person is a strong advantage. And especially in the government space, I think, government has a really strong focus on lifting cultural capability to be able to go to other agencies and experience and share your experience and knowledge as well, and show that that you bring your skills to that particular organisation is another advantage as well.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Really, really insightful. So I've got a couple of questions one from Tanya and one from Wilson. Yes, so Tanya's just saying big thanks for all the wonderful mahi you've put into this. She asked, did you have any concerns about having a Pākehā front this module? Reason I ask is that when I was developing Te Ao learning, I received some quite strong feedback that there should be Māori fronting the framework, or at least sharing the front person role.
And that is a great question. Thank you, Tanya. Yep, very much in my mind when developing content. Content being tika is really important to me. So we chose someone like Jeremy because a couple of things. We knew that he was on the journey, and we knew that he had the right amount of pronunciation for the module. So yes, every time it's always a balance of trying to get the right person to front, but also with the right set of skills. And I always have a focus on, I empathize for the end user or the learner, and trying to make the learning as accessible as possible. So it's not easy finding the right person, but when you do, and they can tick most of those boxes, I will always sort of gravitate towards that opportunity, I think. I hope that answers your question,
and I think, yeah, does that answer your question, Tanya? Top of my screen here. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Tanya.
Yeah,
great, and thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me you've been quite deliberate with with using Jeremy. And accessible is a really good word to use there, I reckon. So yeah, well played. Wilson, cool. Loved the module. What's the plan for more of these in the future? This one's fantastic. Great way to get started. Will it be a progression? It's almost like we teed you up with that question there, Wilson. But Chris, what do you have to share on that front?
Yes, Wilson, it's a great question. Thank you. Yes, it is a progression. What we'd actually like to do is in the next 4 to 5 months is to focus on quite a big chunky topic. And it's in line with a Waitangi weekend and actually having a focus on building content around the history of Aotearoa and the Treaty of Waitangi. So we're looking to have a release in February of next year. That's our plan for the next period of time, and then we'll think about other topics after that. What we're actually doing is at the moment undertaking, this is a flash word too, that my partner has sort of a feasibility study. So what that basically means is we want to make sure what we're doing is there's a market for it and there are customers that are keen for us to actually really to focus on building more content. So I've talked to around about 10 different clients, and they're mainly in the government space, but I'm also interested in talking to any private industry, just saying if anyone's keen to, and just to see what their appetite is for this type of learning. And then what we'd like to do is go through that phase of building content and actually include the voice of the customer in that design process. And when I've spoken to Dan, he said, yep, if we were to get to that place, we'd offer a bit of a discount around content when that time comes, if you wanted to be involved in it. So, we don't want to be sort of designing things in isolation. And I'm very much a collaborator. So I really want to make sure that what we design and build has the voice of the customer involved in that process as well.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, Wilson. Great question, and thank you. Thanks, Chris. I know we've ticked over 3:46, so we're just a minute over. I've really enjoyed this discussion, Chris. It's real highlight for me. I've looked forward to this for a number of weeks. Are there any final quick questions that anyone wants to fire through for Chris? And if there's something you want to ask him directly as well, we can share Chris's contact details following, so you can reach out to Chris if that's cool, Chris. Direct.
Yeah, kapai. All good.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, but I'll just chat just in case some last questions come in. But I just want to thank you so much, and I'm really, really grateful for you, spending, the last 45 odd minutes talking to us as a group. I've learned a lot. Lots of big takeaways, and looking forward to going through that module in a little bit more detail and watching Jeremy again, because he's a character, all right. But if we're going to send you the link to that module afterwards, if it is something you're wanting to put into your LMS and you need a SCORM package, we can provide that too on request. So just flick that request through to myself. Yeah, any final thoughts or nuggets of gold you want to leave us with, Chris?
Just a final proverb or whakatauki that I would share with you. Poi te kakano kia pua wai, which basically means nurture the seed and it will blossom. And I think that's the space that I'm in currently, and I hope that you will join me. So kia ora.
Ka pai. Fabulous. Well, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got any questions, please do shoot them through. We're putting all these meetups on YouTube. There's a lot of folks that are asking to either watch the content again or share with some colleagues, or some folks can't make everyone. So we'll make sure we send out the link to our YouTube channel following this as well, and a few extra resources just off the back of today's discussion. But thank you so much, Chris, again. Hopefully we can get you again on another call, maybe schedule it in closer to the launch of the module next year in February, if not before. But take care, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe, and we'll speak to you again next week.
Mā te wā.